Alright guys, let's jump right into this video. If you haven't watched the video I posted alongside this about when we broke the stock engine record for the Gen 1 Coyote, this is going to be a more in-depth look at what I think of the suspension setup, because we've made some changes, and also going through the data log as a result of that pass, just analyzing the data, seeing if there's anything left on the table, what the oil pressure issue is. If you didn't see that other video, you don't know about that. It lost oil pressure a little bit the last hit. So let's dive right into that. Watch this first pass. This is the 8.26 hit in full speed. Okay, so I've slowed this video down to 30% the original speed. Now, it wasn't filmed in slow motion, so the film's not going to be the greatest quality. I've got it set aside a little, or ahead a little bit already. We're already on the two-step, but we need to look for a couple things here. We're trying to see what the tire's doing on the trans brake release, what the body to tire separation looks like as power comes in, and also what the front end's doing at the initial tire hit, right? So you're going to see this come up, hit the limiter, what speed it does that in, if it hits the top of the suspension before this thing is fully extended, that kind of stuff. So let's watch this real quick. We'll just watch it right through and then I'll back it up. You see the tire move. Again, the video quality isn't great. Okay, so we can back that up a little bit. Let's go right to the initial tire movement here. You can see that right there. See how hard it hits the tire? Look at the tire deformation. That's really what you want in a radial tire car anyway, but that's pretty typical of a short third link, a short upper control arm setup like these have. It's going to be pretty violent at the hit, and then as the suspension separates, the instant center moves way out in front of the car very quickly with very little separation. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm not going to try to make them up as we go here, and you'll see it separates there at the hit, and then as the power comes in, you'll see it separate again. See, the front of the car is not, it's against the limiter there, but the tire is still on the ground. Then it's up in the air. And watch the rear of the car. See the separation grow? Right there, it's fully extended. So the front tire is in the air, obviously against the travel limiter. This thing's fully extended here. Now what you'll see is when the front settles down, the back of the car comes down as well, along with it. Right there, you can see the rear separation settle. Now it's pretty insignificant, but it does do that. I guess if I travel it that way, it looks a little bit, you can tell a little bit better when it sets down. It sets the back down a little bit as well. But what I think this thing needs, I could tighten the front suspension travel up more. Sorry, this thing's a little sensitive to my movements here. We'll watch it again just in play mode. Right, so I can tighten the front suspension up a little bit more. I think the suspension rate shock adjustment is close, but that is full tight on those front struts. Again, I went to a 300-pound front spring to try to get back into the strut adjustment range, and it just hasn't worked. Anyway, so I think that everything looks good here. I wouldn't expect the rear suspension to work much better than this. I think that's pretty happy. If anything, if I had a four-way adjustable shock so I could adjust the low speed and the high speed, I'd probably leave the low speed alone and put a little bit of high speed rebound in it so it doesn't hit the tire as hard on the initial movement. But again, it's working well, obviously. So I think shorten the front travel up a little bit more, maybe go to a stiffer spring yet up there to try to get back in that strut adjustment range. But again, this track was phenomenal good this night, and if the surface was a little sketchy, you'd want to be able to pull some rebound out of it. So you got to find your happy medium there. But so far, I'm really happy with how that stuff turned out. All right, now that we've gone over the suspension stuff, again, I'm pretty happy with how that looked up. Here's the data log from the past. Now, the first thing I want to touch on is the oil pressure issue. Now, I thought we hurt this thing because if you watch the previous video, you hear it made some valve train noise after the pass, but check this out. Oil pressure's here. We're 90 pounds there at 7,600 or so. As we come up here, you see the oil pressure falls all the way down to 69 pounds or so, which obviously isn't nothing, right? It's still a fairly decent amount of oil pressure. And then as soon as I lift, it comes back up. I really think that that's maybe some windage issues, maybe just an oil fill level problem. Now, the pass before, I was turning within a couple hundred RPM of this, and it didn't do that. So I'm thinking that the additional crankcase pressure is maybe causing a little bit different windage situation inside the engine, which is why on the additional power level, even at the same RPM, we were seeing an oil pressure problem. I think I can cure that with just adding some additional oil. Now, it does still have a stock oil pan on it, and I don't remember how well baffled the actual sump in the oil pan is. The new engine's going to get a Moroso pan, but again, I think we could band-aid that with just some additional oil. But we're not gonna pursue that much. So anyway, let's look at the fun stuff here. So up here we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. So we have drive shaft speed, fuel pressure, wideband O2 sensor, oil pressure, obviously injector duty, just typical RPM. Down here we have race time, intake temp, engine pressure ratio. So this is a percentage of manifold pressure versus exhaust back pressure. And then here we have pre-intercooler pressure sensor. If you guys have been following along with this, you know I've been concerned with the limitation of the intercooler. It's got an air-to-water intercooler in the intake manifold, which is a Garrett 1,000 horse core deal. So I'm worried at what point that's going to become either a pressure restriction or when it's not going to be able to keep up with the intake temps. Then we have exhaust manifold pressure and manifold pressure just boost here. So go through this a little bit. You'll see here on the two-step, we're 5,000 RPM on the two-step up here. Now you see this drop in manifold pressure here. I want to show you guys that. There's way too much going on here. 1 second. Okay. So you see that little drop there? That's right when I release the trans brake, and it's as the engine RPM is on its way up to stall speed. Give you a better idea here. You can see that the manifold pressure correlates, that drop correlates right to when I release the trans brake. and what happens is basically it's just the engine's unloaded for a second before it reaches the converter stall speed. That's why there's this literally vertical line here of RPM. And when it reaches that again, it starts to build pressure again, right? So we left on 21 pounds, 21.9, 22 pounds, call it whatever you want. And race time there is still 0 seconds. So you can tell that that's right when I'm releasing the brake here. And we go up to 7/10 of a second. We are at 30 pounds of boost. I run, let's look through the gear here. So this is the top of first. We're 31.7. In the second, it falls down to 30. Another thing I'm going to add real quick to show you guys is the wastegate pressure. So this thing is boost is controlled by dome pressure here, not a manifold pressure target. It's a dome pressure target. So to give you an idea what that looks like, this range is all over the place here. Hold on. All right, so you guys can see that a little bit better. Okay, so you can see it kind of tapers down as I go down track and the values up here. So I put 48 in it in low to try to basically I'm trying to make the boost the same throughout the whole pass, right? So I got 48 in it up here. You can see the PID loop needs a little bit of work as it's hunting within a pound or so. And then I pulled it back to 45-ish down track was my target. You can see it's 46 or so, whatever. Close enough for the girls we go with, right? But it's yeah, it looks pretty good. So the cool thing there is just the boost controls tracking about how I'd want. You see manifold pressure is pretty straightforward throughout the pass. And look up here, the intake or the intercooler pressure sensor. There's generic pressure there. Check out how well that tracks with the manifold pressure. See how close together those are? That's pretty cool there. So that intercooler is not yet a restriction, which is awesome. I was for sure we were going to have a restriction there at some point soon, and we haven't reached it. Another cool thing to look at here is just intake temp. Oh, I had it up there already. So you can see we started the pass down here at around 57 degrees intake temp. Now ambient was probably 75. It was like 10:30 at night, so probably 75 degrees or so. And by the end of the pass here, it only got up to about 91 degrees when we lifted. It kind of creeped a little bit, 92, not a big deal, obviously. So this is using a Rife, one of their Rife IAT sensors, which is cool because they're much quicker reacting. So I trust this data significantly more than the other stuff. But 92 degrees on 31 pounds is I'm pretty stoked about that. I'm really happy with how the intercooler is functioning still, which is just awesome. Another thing to look at here is exhaust manifold pressure. Tag that in there, and then we're going to get rid of our wastegate pressure data there. See if we can make these a little bit more prominent. Oh, exhaust manifold pressure. Okay. So you can see exhaust manifold pressure. It has a little sweet spot here where it's pretty close to 1-to-1, and you can see that in the percentage that we're looking at here as well, right? But you can tell that it's still got a bit more exhaust pressure than it does manifold pressure at this power level. I was hoping to help some of that over the 80, and this is definitely better than the 80 millimeter turbocharger, 96 millimeter turbine wheel. Better than that was significantly. But I'd like to see it. I think we could do a little bit better with this yet with a little larger charger or a set of twins. But again, we're nowhere near maxing out this 94. So we're just going to keep cranking it up until it quits making power, essentially. Up here, a couple things to look at. We already looked at oil pressure, injector duty cycle over fuel pressure. So you can see all this stuff looks good. So here's our fuel pressure here, injector duty here. Now these are Deca 220s. So you can see by the end of this poll here, we're mid 90s, but it is a bit overfueled too. Wideband's reading 0.74 there. I have it set rich on purpose just to try to keep it alive. And it's in that mid 7.5, 7.6 area pretty much the whole way through high gear there. Injector duties from low 90s, mid 90s. I think we've got a crank trigger pickup issue in the top RPMs. I thought I hit the chip. I thought I was hitting the rev limiter, but I don't believe I was. But check out the RPM data here. If you watch this here, 8250, right? So it like doesn't linearly, it doesn't climb. See, it drops there. Oh, and then I'm out of it, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's okay, but the data just makes me nervous. It close a couple of these here so you can see what I'm talking about. I don't know if it'll let me move that one. There we go. Well, kind of just see how it looks noisy, how the signal looks choppier up there. And look at what we're seeing down here in the exhaust manifold pressure, right? So this isn't on the limiter yet, and the exhaust manifold pressure just goes berserk. Now, it's pretty likely that we're running into a valve train stability issue. That said, I am tracking a few of these things. Let's get rid of, I think I'm pretty satisfied with what I've showed you guys on this stuff. So let's delete some of these channels. We'll come back and look at the cam timing stuff. Here, I started logging all of these. Now, there is still something wrong with the intake cam on bank 2, and I don't know why, but the data from that is pretty much junk. But so exhaust cam target, see it starts oscillating a bit there. But again, I think that's a PID loop thing because they both do fairly similar stuff. And the target there is that line, right? So that looks like it's still keeping up fairly okay. We'll get rid of these and pull the intake cam stuff up a second here. Intake cam 1, intake cam target. All right, so that thing is like perfect. But you can tell up here, well, it's not that necessarily, I guess that it's not, it's definitely still following the target. So it could very well be float, but I don't think it's float because it's still following the target so well. So I don't know what that exhaust back pressure crazy signal stuff is. I really think we have a crank trigger signal problem up there. This still has a factory crank trigger wheel in it. And I know people replace them with like MMR makes a billet one for higher RPM stuff, and maybe this is why, and that's just the point we're at. It's kind of one of those things you just have to try it in order to see what's going on. I'll show you this intake cam 2 bank number 2 thing to show you what I mean about how I think it's junk. I changed the sensor thinking it was a sensor issue, but it's just defaulting. I mean, look at the value it's giving me. So I don't know if that's a data recording issue, but it tracks fine on the 2-step. I really don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. I wonder if we lost an actuator or something. I'm not sure. But whatever. Still did what we wanted it to do. What else do I wanted to show you guys? Really, I guess that's pretty much it. I'll show you the ignition timing we've got going in this thing here. So you can see that. So we're 16 degrees, 32 pounds of boost, 17 degrees up top, 7,500 is a shift point right here. So, but yeah, 16, 17 degrees, pretty much the whole pass. Nothing too crazy to write home about there. But yeah, all in all, everything looks really good. I feel like I could lean the fuel target out a little bit. And we could get some injector play back in here, and I could still up the base pressure too. We're only at 42 pounds of base fuel pressure, which is like okay. I just don't know. It's always a trade off, right? You go up in fuel pressure, you go down in total fuel system flow. So I could very well go up in base fuel pressure, but we might run into a flow limitation on the triple. These are like triple 340s that are in this, and then just run into another fuel system wall. I'm not sure. The real solution here would be to probably up base pressure a little bit, but the better idea would be to add a second set of injectors because, like again, we're up there. I mean, we've got a little bit down in here, and it's like 0.73 lambda there, so it's definitely rich. 0.69, 0.7, it's like way rich up top there. And I could pull these targets back, and we could probably gain another, I don't know, 8% of injector duty, plus up the base fuel pressure to say 50, 55 pounds, something that's relatively controlled. And then we probably have another 5 or 6 pounds of boost to turn the thing up if we really wanted. On the new engine, we'll be able to do that for sure, but on the stock one, I think we could still do that. I really wanted to make another hit and make a swing at sevens. I think it's got a 7-second pass capable setup in it with those fuel system changes, both in the fuel pressure and the fuel targets, and then upping the boost level obviously a bit there. I think it would go, somewhere in the 790, maybe a 780 area. But I don't think we're gonna attempt that. It's just not worth risking the car over. Speaking of that stuff here, let's show you something kind of cool. Look at the converter RPM. Look at how well it's coupled up here. This is up to 4% up top there. So that's pretty cool. And you can see if you get an idea. So this is drive shaft RPM. You can see when they start to couple real hard through high gear and how it pretty much tracks itself all the way up through the traps there, which is just neat stuff. The converter was flashing to 7,400. Check that out. And then I'll put converter pressure in here so you can see how this works. Basically, when you let off the trans brake, the transmission is trying to fill the converter, so it makes a bunch of pressure in the converter. The converter apply to try to couple, and then as it couples, the pressure falls. Right, so that's what we're seeing here. Kind of cool. And it pulls it all the way down to 7,000 RPM as it couples. Pretty cool stuff. I've actually got an external dump on the trans brake leave, and I was gonna wire that thing up to turn it off at a certain boost level. And I'm wondering, I haven't never played with that enough to know what that would look like in the data, but my thought would be is if I turn the external dump down, this would jump up a few pounds of pressure, and maybe it would couple a little sooner. The idea there being it would help with the foot time, right? But I don't know, something maybe we can try down the road. Anyway, I probably rattled your ear off enough with all this data stuff. I don't think there's really anything else to show you guys here. Everything looks pretty decent. Like I said, I think we've got a little bit more in it if we wanted it. But for now, 826, 164 mile an hour, that stock long block, it still just baffles me. This thing's like stock valve spring, stock camshaft, stock timing chain guides. I mean, it literally has oil pump gears only. It's just crazy. I don't even know how to. I don't know. It just keeps impressing me. So hopefully it's not hurt. I still haven't pulled the oil filter off. I will do that at some point and see if we've actually heard it from that little oil pressure dip we saw up here. But again, I don't think that we have. I think it'll be okay just based on the fact that all of the valve train noise was good by the time we got back to the pits. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Look out for the next video.